All right, we're Group D here to talk about AWS Lambda and all the cool things that it has to offer. So, what is it? Well, it's serverless computing. So, it's what makes it really easy for us to run code without thinking about our servers, right? So, we only have to pay for the compute time that we consume, and that can save a lot of money. So, there's three different offerings that Amazon has to run code. Basically, you have your EC2, ECS, and Lambda. So the EC2 is more of your full server VM. ECS runs more on the app level, and then Lambda is based off of functions, essentially. And you run them whenever you need to use them. They're not always going, and you only pay for when they're being used. So why do we want to use it? Well, it's because we get to skip servers, scale swiftly, and save stacks. So don't have to manage the servers. We can easily write the code and upload it straight to Lambda to use with our applications. And we continuously scale with it. So as they get used more, things get, the application, Lambda can adjust to that based off of its metering. So every 100 milliseconds, your code executes. Basically, you're charged for however many times it gets executed. And so that way, when it's not being used, you're not paying for it. And that makes it really great.
So on to how it works. So Lambda, kind of to oversimplify it, is a set of functions with triggers. So in AWS, we upload our code. We set these Lambda instances up. And then we set up ways to trigger them, whether that's cron or chromatic points, whether it's HTTP endpoints, mobile apps, or any other AWS services like S3 or something like that. And then when those things are triggered, then Lambda is going to trigger those functions and they're going to start running. And like Corey was mentioning, we only pay for the compute time that we use. So as kind of an example, we have our, a little website, our client, our users on the browser. We have an authentication service, and we have a product database and a purchase database. Through API Gateway in this instance, those purchase and search functions are going to be served up with Lambda. So when the customer is searching for a product, that Lambda function is going to go query the database, return that data back to the browser. Same thing with the purchase function. It's going to send information to the purchase database and return something back to the user via Lambda. Some of the AWS services that integrate with Lambda include S3 as kind of an example. Maybe when a user uploads an image to an S3 bucket, that can trigger a Lambda function to go resize that image. Or maybe when they drop in a CSV file, it can go clean the data. It can also work with Amazon's NoSQL database, DynamoDB. It can work with the regular RDS database. Lambda functions can be triggered by Alexa functions, like we talked about API Gateway, or any other Internet of Things tools that we have. Lambda can also be triggered by and trigger emails through emails or other notifications, like on an application or something. And it can also be monitored and watched the whole time with CloudWatch and other tools like that Amazon has. So it's a really new technology, and the list is continuing to grow, as it says on the bottom. But we have a lot of cool features that we can already do with it now.
Okay, let's talk about example architecture. So we're familiar with kind of our old school architecture, where we've got application server, database, kind of everything's running all together. We might have the development server or application servers kind of running everything all together. Even if we're in a cloud-based structure, in this example here, we've got app servers, web servers, we've got an RDS instance that's running, and even a backup RDS instance that's in standby. So these are kind of our old school architectures that when you look at, there are certain things here that Lambda can actually help facilitate and simplify. So looking at the new school architecture, here's an example of kind of think of an e-commerce style website that can actually use the API Gateway and Lambda to go through and add an item to a customer shopping cart that also then returns through the API gateway and through Lambda cart status or display cart. Those are things that Lambda can go through and help and facilitate. In this example, with squirrelbin.com, we can see that as the mobile site and Alexa and even the regular desktop sites are hitting these REST APIs, this API gateway here, it is then going and calling these different Squirrel Bin Lambda functions. So we can see run, list, create, read, update, and delete that are all going and then hitting the RDBS database and then going through and doing different things there. In this instance, again, here's another site that has some functionality where S3 and API gateway and Lambda is going and then hitting the DynamoDB. We then have another Lambda function that's there to go and send us an email notification. And or there's also a watcher Lambda that's going through and based off of different cloud events to go through and do different things. So Lambda's there to help us simplify services and functions that we typically would set up in an old style architecture with perhaps an actual server with different services running that didn't need to happen all the time. This helps us modify that into a function or a snippet of code that can run only when we need it to, and makes it way nicer.
So what can be built with an AWS Lambda? Really anything can be built with a Lambda. And just because anything can be built with a Lambda doesn't mean everything should be. There are some things that would work well with a Lambda, and a Lambda would speed up the process significantly. There's other processes that there might be other effective alternatives to do the same thing. But if a Lambda is what you need and it will speed up your process, it's very effective and it's a very good way to do things. Lambdas can be used for real-time file processing, for real-time stream processing, extracting data from databases, other sources, transforming it and loading it or returning it back to you. So essentially a Lambda is something that is used for small, quick jobs that otherwise you wouldn't want to pay for a whole server to do. Just small things like database calls, like transformations. These can all be done easily with Lambdas. The backends for Lambdas, you can use Lambdas for your mobile apps, for your web apps, really for any type of application. And a Lambda can be integrated in a way that makes your calls or that makes your little functions work quick and easily. Lambda is great for those types of things. So as we move forward, we're going to do a quick demo for you guys, creating a Lambda and implementing it into your code. So we're going to head into that now. All right, so we're going to go through the process of creating a Lambda on AWS. So if you click at the top, you can go to services and see all the services that are offered. And it's there that you can just search Lambda. After you click on Lambda, right now I don't have any created, so it tells me here. And there's an option to create a function, so I'm going to go ahead and go to that. All right, so on this page, it shows a lot of pre-made Lambdas, a lot of things that are commonly used. But what we're going to do for our purposes, we're just going to author one from scratch, just create a new Lambda. And I'm going to call the name just test function. And you need a role for this Lambda. And I'm just going to use the existing role that it's the default on AWS, just the test role. And then just click the create function button. All right, so at the top it says, congratulations, your Lambda function, test function has been successfully created. And it shows us our code, this entry where we can write our code in. The default for a Lambda is Node.js. I think most of us are more familiar with Python, so we're going to change it to Python 3.6. And so what we're looking at now, it says here at the top of this code, it says lambda_function.py. And that's just a Python file that's hosted on AWS. And in here we're going to create a handler for our Lambda. So up at the top of this field it says handler, lambda_function, that's our Python file, dot lambda_handler.
I've got some code that I've written, just a simple Lambda function. And the title on my function is called myHandler. So I'm just going to change that up here in myHandler. And now when this is called, it'll call my function that's inside of this Lambda function Python file. And that'll just take the event, the data that's passed in, and it'll format it to return a message that says, hello, whatever name is returned. So now that I've got that, I can save this code. I can save this Lambda function. And I'm going to need to test it. So I can go up here to test, click test, and it'll have me create some information that I'm passing in to test this function. I'm just going to pass in 2 values just to make it simple, and that'll be the first name and the last name that I used. And I'm going to say the first name is going to be Cosmo. The second name will be the Cougar, Cosmo the Cougar. All right, so I've created that. I need an event name. This will just be test event, just for my uses. And then I can create that configuration. So now if I go to test it one more time, I've got test event selected in here. It's going to test my Lambda function with that data coming in. So I do that. My execution results, it succeeded, so the Lambda function worked. And it shows here my results. My message is hello, Cosmo the Cougar. And so I've got this Lambda working. It's calling just fine, and it's doing what I want to. In this space, I could have done many things. I could have received an image. I could have I could have called to a SQL database and received information. And just here is where I'd manipulate it, and I could return it in my function. Here, I just did a very simple explanation, but a very simple example. Going down, just a little more that you can do with Lambdas. You've got triggers. So when you click on triggers, we talked a little bit earlier about how you can trigger a Lambda call. Here you can add triggers. So you could add an API gateway that you've created. You could add, you could make it so that it happens when you drop something in an S3 bucket. You could connect it to DynamoDB. There's different AWS features that you could connect it to. And I'm just going to use an API gateway, just the default one, and I'll submit that. And that gateway is what I'd put in my code. And it looks like I've set this up previously, but and then you can also go to monitoring, and you can see all the times that this Lambda has been called, which is very interesting. You can see in the past how many times I've called the Lambda, and if it was internal or external, I can see all that. So essentially, that's creating a Lambda function, and that's how you test a function, and that's how you set it up and connect it to a gateway. Lambdas are very useful. You can do a lot with them, and they can make a huge impact in your company. Look for those use cases that you can use Lambda, because they can help you out a lot.